I never realized how polite Hannibal actually is.
There's a line in the book that I always think of where I think it was either in Silence of the Lambs or it might have been in Red Dragon, that Hannibal basically is so remarkably polite because after all of the really horrible, terrible shit that he's done, there are just some things that are absolutely beneath him. And like rudeness is one of them.
But when I first saw it, I thought he ordered. So she tells him the story about the lambs, and then he orders lamb.
Yes.
I thought at first he was being that was his way of like trolling her to himself, kind of.
Yeah.
But now I realize, or now I thought maybe uh, he was having those cops bring him lamb, like the father did, and then
Yep.
he killed them. So it was like his twisted way of getting revenge for her or something. It could
Something
have been.
along those lines. But also, I think part of it is that Hannibal is such a person of refined taste, and they actually go into it in the TV series and in the books, talking about how acute his sense of taste and sense of smell are. That he might have just had a complete Jones for lamb. It's like that moment of, God, that
She's,
does sound good right about now. You know? I'm currently sitting here spicing up my liver. I'm sure that I've probably pissed off somebody at some point.
I'm Dan Carlson, one quarter of the Lost Blokes, and Snoop Dogg here on my wine cork says hello.
That's cool.
I thoroughly
Snoop Dogg
respect
on a
that.
cork.
Yes.
I'm drinking uh, 13 crimes, 19
Nice.
crimes. I keep forgetting the number of the crimes.
Funny
Serial
how wine
murders.
does that to you.
Serial murders often forget how many people they've killed, so I guess that's it, keeping in theme.
I'm John Cadolf. I am also one of the Lost Blokes. And today I am drinking a nice Chianti. Well, I decided to whip up some liver and some fava beans.
Ah,
How does that actually taste? Is it as good as Hannibal talks about in the movie?
Oh yeah. And it perfectly complements
The Chianti.
the Chianti.
We need your
hi.
introduction.
I'm Dave Nesbitt, another quarter of the Lost Blokes. We are currently waiting on the fourth of us. At some point in time, they will turn up. But in the meantime, I am Dave Nesbitt, a quarter of the Lost Blokes. I am not drinking wine because wine is infinitely more dangerous to me than this, which is Canadian whiskey. Pendleton, I highly recommend it. For years, Canadian whiskey was kind of an embarrassment to the nation of Canada, but now they're finally getting it right.
Really?
Yeah.
Why was it an embarrassment? What did it not? Did it use inferior grapes?
Something. It was basically stuff along the lines of like Black Velvet and I think Crown Royal and a few others that were like, kind of commercial grade, made a nice cocktail whiskey, but if you drank it straight, you kind of wondered who the fuck just kicked you in the head. And this is infinitely smoother, much tastier, kind of got some vanilla and caramel notes going on. It's very tasty.
I am the Madhat Katt. 25% of the Lost Blokes.
There we are.
We are all lost. Some of us in more ways than others.
So Dave and I were discussing whether Hannibal was an actual cannibal who became a psychiatrist or a psychiatrist who got curious about the taste of human flesh. And Dave,
He was a cannibal.
It's Dave's belief that he was a cannibal from the outset, and psychiatry was sort of his minor.
Yeah.
He minored in psychology and majored in cannibalism.
Well, let's not forget the murder too. I'm just saying,
Oh yeah.
And I think that Hannibal in his in his various incarnations is the sort of person who, if he looks down upon you, he's probably looking at you as in, no, really, the world doesn't need you. It's like the comment he makes about Raspail in both the book and the film, saying, it really was the best thing for him. His therapy was going nowhere.
Yeah, he was certainly a cannibal ahead of time because of what happened to his family.
Yeah.
Oh, I've seen all the prequels and sequels.
Oh no, we're talking about the series.
Okay.
The series really gives you the background of what happened to cause him to become a cannibal.
So anyway, there's this FBI agent trainee named Clarice Starling, played by Jodie Foster, who is going through the FBI Academy and then gets called aside to help out with interviewing a particularly well-known serial killer and cannibal named Hannibal Lecter. Also, her...
Do you think that he was named Hannibal and then he realized that it rhymed with cannibal and then he thought, well, I better go eat people?
No! No, 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 no!
But anyway, also her boss is played by Scott Glenn, who as usual, Scott Glenn's the shit out of everything, and that means he's just amazing. So she goes to the Baltimore, I don't know the actual, can't remember the name of
I thought she was at Quantico.
Well, she's at Quantico, but Hannibal is actually in Baltimore. And if you actually take a look at a map, Baltimore is not that far from the Virginia border.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's like literally you can throw a rock and hit it from, the Maryland and Virginia have very, very close borders.
Okay, that's good because she does a lot of traveling in this movie.
Yeah, back and forth between the two of them.
Yeah.
Goes to go visit Hannibal, and long story short, he gives her, after she has gone in there, and he feels somewhat insulted because she's not a full FBI agent at this particular point in time, still being a trainee, asks him to fill out a questionnaire, and it's only because an inmate mistreats her that Hannibal actually starts giving her information, because that inmate was rude to her, and Hannibal just does not do rudeness. He gives her information about an ongoing serial killer case that is happening, as the film is going on. We also get a fill-in at this point in time of the person who's going to be the primary bad guy of the film, a character by the name of James Gumb. And we're going to get into some serious discussion over James and some of the issues that are going hand in hand here. But James Gumb is basically kidnapping women so that way he can make a woman suit. Long story short, a lot of this is borrowed from the case of somebody from Wisconsin named Ed Gein.
Yes.
And Ed Gein would be the inspiration for Leatherface,
Norman Bates.
Norman Bates, James Gumb, a whole lot of serial killer and horror film lore is based off of Ed Gein. Ed had some psychosis issues.
But
he was a nice neighbor.
And I spoke to somebody who actually worked at the hospital that Ed had been kept at, because they ruled him guilty, but then also ruled it was better for him to be in a psychological institution than it would be for him to be in jail. And everybody there said he was a model prisoner and a very, very sweet person. Mm-hmm. Just not the sort of person you allow out into public after all the crazy shit that he did. Hannibal intimates the idea to the FBI that he has inside information on this particular serial killer, James Gumb, and uses it as a way to get out of the mental hospital that he's in and is moved to a different location, and then uses that as a means to escape. His escape plan, by the way, is, completely well thought out. And also, one of the things that works very well when you're an utter psychopath is that you're willing to take certain steps that nobody else would have thought of. Like, for example, wearing a police officer's face. It's kind of that moment when you're sitting there and there's let's say that you walk in and you meet somebody's pet tiger. Like, you're aware that it's a tiger. You're also aware that you should be as respectful as all get out because it's a tiger. And just because it's someone's pet doesn't mean that damn thing doesn't have claws and teeth.
Right.
And I think that she's aware that Hannibal is putting his best face forward toward her. But also he's controlling everything about that relationship. He has control over the flow of information. He can shut up at any given moment and end this, and she's aware of it. And it makes, I think that he looks at her, realizes that she knows that this is a game, sets out the rules, and as long as she stays within the parameters of the rules he establishes, he just basically helps her. Because in the end, also the realization that helping Clarice Starling is going to drive a whole bunch of FBI agents he knows completely insane. Hannibal escapes, disappears. Clarice gets a line on how to find James Gumb, because he's basically he lived right next door to the first victim of his killing spree. Goes over to basically ask questions about the victim, and then discovers, oh wait, this person is actually the killer the hard way when he disappears. And there's a good, really intense chase scene And then there's moments with a night vision goggle, and then she turns around and kills James Gum. The way the film ends, though, is still personally my favorite moment. She gets her FBI badge. She gets, credited for the work that she did on this particular case. But she gets a phone call, answers it, and it's Hannibal Lecter who gives her some last minute. Go ahead.
I just want to point out that that phone call comes right after Scott Glenn tells her that her father would have been proud of her on this day. And that's a surrogate father calling her and saying, hey, I'm proud of you on this day. But by the way, don't come after me.
And then concludes with, you pull out and you see Anthony Hopkins, who's now wearing a blonde wig and looks actually an awful lot like Rutger Hauer in that shot.
Yes.
With that white linen suit. Ooh.
With that white linen suit. And they're in some island, and you assume in the Caribbean. And you look.
Yeah,
and
it's definitely in the Caribbean.
Yeah, you see him looking, and there's Dr. Chilton, the guy who was running the institution that he was kept in, and
looking very nervous for some reason.
Very nervous. And then he ends with the line of, I have to go now. I'm having an old friend for dinner.
Yes, I love it.
Goodbye, Clarice.
And I don't know about you all, but I every time the movie finishes, I sit and I follow him into the crowd as long as I can until he can't see him anymore at all.
If you want the ultimate Hannibal experience, go to your local zoo and then lock eyes with a snake. It has that, looking at Anthony Hopkins, and also when Brian Cox did it too, looking in their eyes at that point, there is a feeling of a distinct lack of any sort of like human relatability.
At two different zoos, the San Antonio Zoo and the Milwaukee Zoo, I locked eyes with the rattlesnake in the rattlesnake cage, and like 5 or 6 of them came down and just stared at me right at the glass. That happened in San Antonio and in Milwaukee.
So
they've got a network, man. Like,
yeah,
you fuck with one in one state, like they're gonna get the message to everyone else, and you better watch out.
I think that they knew that I wanted to let them free.
Mr. Parcel Tongue.
Whenever you're looking through, Jodie Foster never looks directly at the camera, or very rarely.
Yeah.
And everyone else is looking directly at the camera because you're seeing through her eyes. And throughout the movie, this is something we touched on too. Throughout the movie, there's guys hitting on her constantly or checking her out constantly, and it's just like either a nuisance or like actually a hassle, or it's an obstacle to something that she wants to, that she's trying to achieve, some seriousness that she's trying to attend to, and it's just interesting that the movie went there.
But yeah, Lindsay Ellis's recent video, I don't know if you mentioned that, Dave, and by recent I mean within the last
figured I would wait until we got. I figured we'd arrive.
One of the things that she specifically mentions, and I mean, I love having her talk about movies because she has all that film studies knowledge, and I don't know how I've never noticed that particular technique with the camera, because it's not using close-ups in film and television are very, very common. I mean, it's one of the ways that they use to tell stories and make things feel very personal. But generally speaking, it's still more of an outsider looking in sort of thing. And, the characters are almost never looking directly into the camera. They're usually always looking just off to the side, down, up, because they're talking to the other person. And I don't know if you guys remember, I don't recall a single time where Clarice is looking directly into the camera, except maybe in the end when she's chasing James around. But all the other men, and with the exception of maybe the guy, like I can't tell if he's like Ukrainian or maybe just like old world Jewish. The guy who owns the storage. No. The guy who owns the storage facility. He's like, my driver does not like hard labor.
Yeah, he detests hard labor.
Yes, that's such a good line. But that guy, and then Barney, the orderly at the like maximum security asylum, they all are still looking directly into the camera at certain times, but there is a definite difference in how they are looking into the camera. Barney specifically, he's looking at Clarice with, like, you know, compassion and genuine respect. Yeah.
He also does the
That's
same. He also does the same with Lecter. He
And it's
treats
less-
Lecter with respect and like a
Exactly.
human being.
Well, that was
And-
something that they actually covered in the books, is Barney's Barney's relationship with Lecter.
See, I would love to read
because
more about that.
Oh yeah, because Barney is ultimately aware of the fact that if he gives Lecter the opportunity, Lecter will kill him to escape.
Yeah.
But at the same time, he's aware that as long as he treats Lecter with respect,
Mhm.
Lecter will treat him the same way. So they have
Yeah.
a very polite but very firm relationship. Lecter's aware that Barney will never, ever, ever let him get away with anything. Barney has made him aware of that. And literally at one point in the book Hannibal, Barney talks about how he was studying, he becomes a psychological orderly.
Mhm.
And Hannibal actually helped him study for his degree. But again, every time that it came down to a business moment, it was, Dr. Lecter, stand at the wall or I will mace you in the face.
In real life interactions with serial killers, both I watch a lot of, John does too, watches a lot of serial killer documentaries, and the FBI or the interrogators or whoever are always very respectful whenever they can be. Ed Kemper even has gotten to the point, I mean, he's a terrible serial killer, but he's recording audiobooks. You know, he's got things good, you know, so my point is, you're going to get more information with respect than you are with this kind of manipulation.
Watching Kemper in Mindhunters when he's talking about Manson is really, it shows you how much that, it shows you just how smart Kemper really was, because he saw through Manson the second he walked through the door.
Gosh, it sticks out so much, and it's just one of the things that makes this a really, really good movie, is being very, very careful with the camera setup. Plus just phenomenal fucking performances pretty much across the board.
Even where he's
in this
bringing
entire thing.
Even when he's bringing in non-actors like Chris Isaac and Roger Corman.
Yeah.
You know, it was nice seeing Roger Corman there going, did I hear that you mixed up some phony fucking deal with the FBI?
There's also, to me, another part
I would say that's a sign of a good director too.
Yes. There's a great lighting element when you look at Lecter, that his eyes are slightly more lit than the rest of him on his face. And the way that it's shot, sometimes it creates shadows and sometimes you actually see his eyes in a much sharper light. But what it really does is it puts an accent on what his motivation in that moment might be. And it's really subtextual, but I love every second of it.
Part of those shots that Dave was talking about, how they're making sure to put a lot of focus on Anthony's eyes. There are a couple of times that comes up. First, when he's still in his cell in Max, and it's that first encounter with Clarice, and he's got that wonderful little monologue where he's just fucking picking her apart.
Yep.
And I've always kind of wondered about that, because he's always so very clear about how he just absolutely detests rudeness. And then there are a couple of moments where he's talking to Clarice where he would, like other people, I think, would look at that as him being like sexually forward or like harassment, sexual harassment. Yeah. Like when he said, "Did the rancher make you perform fellatio?" And selling you, oh yeah, you've got a good bed, but you've got cheap shoes. And was it awful in high school? Fumbling around with a bunch of dumb West Virginia boys.
I think that it definitely could be seen that way, and but I think from his perspective,
I think he's just testing her.
From his perspective, he's setting the chessboard.
Well, that, and I almost think I think he sees that, like, she's clearly smart, even if she's a little bit green yet.
She's the smartest one there because she notices things that other people don't.
She notices things in the way that that he notices things. They both have kind of that Sherlocky.
The outsider's view too. They're going to notice things because they have to, because they're treated as outsiders. They have to. Well,
and there's a lot of that in this movie. There's a whole lot of people getting underestimated again and again and again. People continually underestimate Lecter even after like, you know, putting so much effort and time into like building big teams to, you know, like keep him contained, and yet he still escapes, is because they underestimate him, is because they look down on him as less than, which, you know, like, oh, well, I'm not a serial killer, so, you know, I'm so much better than you.
They underestimate
Yeah.
the fact that he's insane. And
Oh,
I think that they look at him as insane and they say, well, you know, we've got the drop on him because, well, he's crazy. And you know, we're not,
Well,
so we can think more clearly than him. But no,
well, and then when he
But
said
that's
when
the
he
biggest
says
issue.
things that, you know, make him sound like he like basically performs a sick burn because he's so much smarter than them, the people who are underestimating him already get pissed off and defensive, and it makes them lose their head, and they lose whatever little edge they might have.
when it comes to the term insanity, we have to remember that insanity as a term, as far as the world is concerned, is a legal term. It's not a medical term.
Yeah.
If you're listed as being basically criminally insane, what it basically means is that you are unaware of the fact that what you did was wrong.
right.
Yeah.
You have no reference point to it. Hannibal knows exactly what he did, and would do it all over again just for the sheer entertainment value, and does. Spoiler alert. And but I
It's
think
been out
because-
for 30 years. I think we don't have to worry about spoilers.
Yeah. But long story short, I think that a lot of people are sitting there going, well, he's mentally ill, so therefore he's not nearly as intelligent. No, he's a psychopath, and therefore there are no emotions, basically, there's no emotional content clouding his intelligence. You
Mhm.
are an object, and all he's been doing is itemizing your list of weaknesses.
But
Yeah.
but he doesn't view Clarice as an object, which is probably why that scene doesn't totally read like he's harassing her.
Maybe not an object. I think maybe he
Not the
views
same
her
way
more
that-
like a pet.
Not
Yeah.
the same
Like
way
how,
that
how
yes.
most folks would view a pet. Like she's an
Okay.
animal, but she's a clever animal, and so I have
That's-
respect for
There's
her.
a definitely
and
a
she's kind of
difference.
cute. So
There's a difference between the way he views her and the way he views other people.
yes,
Oh, yeah.
yes, there is a difference.
But Clarice also basically becomes very aware pretty much from the outset that, and I think this is something that, because you're writing a female character, women deal with day-to-day tests of dealing with being in a society run by men on a routine basis. So she, in a way, is actually absolutely much better prepared to handle Lecter, who's going to sit there and test her
That's
over and
right.
over again.
Yeah, no, she's fucking ready. Like everyone else, like they, well, and God, again and again, and this is another great thing just about the way that this is shot. The casting on this, like, yes, acting wise, Jodie was fucking perfect for this, but also physically, she is so short and
She gets in that elevator with all those tall guys.
not really frail.
Yeah.
What was the word that I used? She's short. She's very slight.
She's diminutive.
She has very dainty hands. Like there's a lot of hand on hand shots, or like hands being near each other shots in this. And her hands always look so small and slender in comparison to everyone else that she's around. And like when she gets in the fucking elevator at the academy, and like it was weird because she's wandering through the halls, and there are tons of I don't know whether they're students or actually special agents at that point, but you know, around at these long like lab tables, and there seems to be like a pretty even spread of men and women, or at the very least maybe like a 60-40 split. And I kind of was like shocked by that. I was like, is this actually representative of what that spread would have been back in the early 90s?
I would imagine.
She probably was a minority in her department because
but then of course as soon as she gets in the elevator, it's like everybody's so fucking tall. It's a bunch of big burly men. They're all looking at her, and she's like, and I'm just gonna look at the floor for the next 20 seconds, 30 seconds.
And
nope, they're still here.
Right before she gets off the elevator, doesn't she say something like gentlemen or something like that?
There was probably one point I thought
Or there
she
was one point, maybe not in the elevator, but
in the elevator, but yeah.
My brain as a writer, every time I see like an elevator scene like that, I must have filled it in because it didn't happen when I watched it yesterday. But I filled in the scene where she gets in the elevator and then we cut to a shot where they're all just staring at her and she's just like
that may have
that
been.
scene never happens.
I bet you what you did was your brain like took the elevator scene and then the scene when she goes into the morgue / funeral home in I want to say it was a West Virginia town.
Yeah.
Where all of the local cops are like looking at her after Crawford says, well, you know, these are things best discussed not in front of a woman. And then he goes, well, and at first when they walk away, the cops are like looking anywhere but at Clarice. Like they almost seem to be making an effort, but then the door closes and then they're all fucking looking at her and like, I'm gonna go over here. Excuse me.
I like the scene after where he says that bothered you, didn't it? And then she says, yeah, it matters.
Yeah.
When you do that because you're sending
well,
a
you
signal.
know, well, and then he like tries to like, well, it's fine though, because you know I was just blowing smoke, right? Like it matters.
Yeah, because they look to you
on how to act.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, like, she's not being like she handles that situation very carefully. So like, I mean, again, this is the perfect fucking way to display this is like she's in the back seat. She's always very tense, like, or at like very on guard throughout this whole movie. Crawford's like, yes, this has been a lot. And he's like leaning back in his seat in the car and like, that didn't bother you, right? You're fine.
Although he does
like,
say
I don't think he's mean toward her.
No,
and I think he does respect her to some degree, but like
he does say
Crawford underestimates her.
Yeah, he does. He does underestimate, but he does say point taken. So I think she got through to him at that moment.
Yes,
Yeah.
which I appreciate those. Like, fair enough. You're right. I can't fight you on that one.
But long story short, this was still a period of time where women in law enforcement were kind of few and far between.
Yeah.
And I think that Jack, in his own mind, well, he is a better example of how somebody would treat a woman in that particular position. He's still getting used to it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially in the FBI, which up until, you know, about the 1980s or so was really kind of a white male and also especially Catholic group. The running gag for a long time was that in order to be in the FBI, you had to have graduated from BYU or Boston College.
Mm-hmm.
Not BYU, Holy Cross or Boston College.
Yeah.
And like for years, decades, that was the running gag because it was seen as an organization that was remarkably Catholic.
And he chose her because she put him on the spot in front of a class. She asked him about the Hoover years with the FBI and kind of like forced his hand in front of the class. And he saw that and he was like, that's who I want doing something like this.
Yeah.
Not some yes man who's going to tell me what I need to hear. So
right.
The FBI. Okay.
Yeah.
So Clarice, along with I don't know if it's her roommate or if it's just a classmate that she's very close to, and I don't know if they actually ever name her in the movie, but the one that she's like sitting down, you know, after that woman comes running and saying, Clarice, Hannibal's escaped. But then the two of them are sitting down there on the bed, like going through all of the case notes and like trying to put it the fuck together. And I had a moment of kind of like, look at you two, you're doing the fucking work and everybody fucking underestimates you. You know, this, you know, one generation away from, or no more than one generation away from white trash, West Virginia girl. And then a black girl. And, you know, the two of them are heavily underestimated by everyone they've ever encountered in their whole fucking lives. And so I love that we have that scene of them, like, they're the ones, again, with that outsider perspective. They're looking at things and seeing things that aren't apparent to other people, no matter how good their training is. And I don't know that I've ever encountered anyone calling Clarice a Mary Sue. And not that that's a bad thing, by the way, necessarily. And I can't remember.
They should call males who can do whatever for no reason Barry Sue.
There's a name for that. It's Marty Stew.
Marty Stew. Okay.
Yeah.
Because
Um,
I mean, why is it? Yeah, okay, I didn't know.
but
that
yeah,
was
I
a
don't
thing.
think Clarice is like super OP or anything. As far as like her behavioral psychology skills go. But yeah, I love that the two of them are the ones who fucking put it together. And we actually do get, before it's all over and said and done, Crawford, is talking to Clarice on the phone while they're in the fucking plane, saying, "We're going to get him right now." But he said, Clarice, we never would have found him without your help. We never would have done it. And he just says it flat out. There's no beating around the bush about it. Another incident of underestimation actually happens, and we can use this to segue into talking about James. Is James underestimating Catherine? Because he's gotten good at this point. I think he has 4 or 5 prior victims before Catherine. I think. Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
He underestimates her on a number of levels. Like, she doesn't just like sit down there crying and shaking. Like, yeah, she's crying and shaking, but she, give you a fucking good little treat, Precious. Here, Precious. Come on, you stupid little shit.
So the flaw in it's almost a flaw throughout all of the men who are looking
whoever's
at
below you, whether it's metaphorically or literally.
Well, the men who are looking at Jodie Foster as an object through the whole movie, plus it's made very explicit that James Gumb is treating not just treating them as an object, but he needs to see them as an object. Whenever they try to assert any humanity, he actually pushes back and mocks them.
No.
So
I had kind of forgotten about that bit where, like, she's pleading with him, and everybody always remembers it puts the lotion in the back. It puts the lotion on its skin, or else it gets the hose again.
Wait, I think John can
That's
say
right,
that a little.
she'll get the hose again.
John, you can say that a little more. Can you say it?
Can I?
Yeah.
Do it.
Do it!
It puts the lotion on the skin, or else it gets the hose again.
Goddamn,
Put the lotion in the basket.
Put the fucking lotion in the basket.
But when he's doing a good job of like keeping her at a distance, calling her it, and like not looking at her, just being very clinical about it all.
Doing a more psychotic version of what everyone else is doing in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. Which is the thing that I think really comes through in this movie, by the way, is that, like, yeah, Hannibal is a fucking monster because he eats people, literally. But all of you basically you basically think too highly of yourselves, because you do like a few steps away from what these serial killers are doing. You just do it more slowly and less dramatically. So don't think of yourselves so fucking highly. But yeah, when Catherine starts, she's saying things, please, mister, I just want to go home, I just want to get out of here. As soon as she starts saying, I want to see my mommy, I want to see my mommy, his lip starts warbling, and he like almost fucking breaks for a second, and then he yells, and put the fucking lotion in the basket. and I don't know if it goes more into it in the book, and I don't know if it's something that Hannibal made up while he's like feeding little bits of information to Clarice and other members of law enforcement and the senator. But it says, our little Billy wasn't always a criminal. This happened through years of systemic abuse. And did they ever go more into that about James or Jamie or whatever his actual name is?
Having read the books, they go into a history of James Gumb, talking about his childhood and his issues with his family and such.
Mm-hmm.
They also do a really good job with that. It's actually it's heartbreaking to read the version of how the killer in Red Dragon became what he was.
Mm-hmm.
It's like,
Oh my God.
Yeah, it's
I love that.
It's heartrending. But one of the things that Thomas Harris does a great job is establishing the actual like root causes and elements of somebody's issues with mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And both and also how it is that a psychosis becomes a coping mechanism for dealing with the ongoing
Exactly,
abuse you've dealt
yeah.
with as a child.
I'm curious, was James Gum a serial killer before he killed his girlfriend, or did he kill his girlfriend and that unlocked that? Because he took the time to weight her down. He wanted to hide that killing, and the rest of them, he just kind of, that's when he started acting like a serial killer, getting sloppy.
So what I understand about serial killing is that it's learned, and that it's tested and it's measured by the person who becomes the serial killer. You know, his first kill is certainly the groundbreaker, and then they
Yeah.
learn from that how easy it really is to take a life, and
Yeah.
and the realization that they have no or that they have little regard for the fact that they took a life,
But-
and the fact that it makes it easier then for them to fulfill a fantasy that they had that would have involved killing people.
But do you
Because
do you think this girl that first girl he killed, who he knew, I don't know if it was actually his girlfriend, or it looks like he took pictures of her at least. Do you think that?
Yeah, that's another thing that I was actually I made a few notes that like all kind of in my metaphorical, case room in my mind with all the red twine. There's Polaroids all over this fucking movie, and every time I see them,
They're
I made little notes about them. There's by the way, another really good fucking shot is when Clarice is in that first victim's room, and she's looking around the room. Another good example of her seeing things that other people don't is where do girls hide their stuff? Where do they keep their secrets in their room?
Yep.
She fucking knows, and she pops that false bottom off the top lid of the music box. And as she pulls it back, the music box, it bends down the ballerina and said, you. And it distorts
Perfect.
as she pulls.
Perfect.
Oh, God. Mwah! When I talk about
Chef
chef
kiss?
kiss moment, that is a chef kiss moment. But she's got those Polaroids of herself in her underwear.
Yep.
And like, do in the book, do they ever say
Were those taken
who
by
took
Jane?
those? Did she take them by herself?
It sounds to me like they were taken. I mean, their Polaroid said that doesn't have a timer on it, so they would have to be taken
Yeah.
by somebody else.
Yeah, they were taken in the actual book. You find out later that they were taken by Jane. And
Okay.
Yeah.
See, and that's something that fucking confuses me. They're in his sewing room, and I didn't notice them until Clarice actually busts through the door. There is this series of maybe 4 to 6 Polaroids of what appears to be Jane. Like, it's a little far away, even though I watched it in Ultra HD. But it looks like Jane sitting in either a porno movie theater or maybe like a strip club or something with all of these naked and or topless women. And I was curious about that, if that was just like him, going wandering looking for his next victim kind of thing. Because yeah, from everything else that everyone says, they make it sound like he's gay, or having gender confusion, as was often a term in the past. A little less so now, not totally eradicated, unfortunately.
in Silence, they go to I'm trying to think the right term, but basically a hospital that does a lot of therapy and gender confirmation surgeries and stuff along those lines, and are asking for basically anything from patients that were rejected.
Right.
And
Hannibal does make
the
mention of that in
hospital,
the movie.
Yeah, and the hospital goes
Hopkins.
out of the way to basically say, look, it's, realistically, hi, this is all very confidential information. We can't give that to you. And they also go into, look, these people get picked on enough. We don't need the FBI crawling down everybody's neck.
I wish that there would have been time in the movie for that, because that I think would have been a lot better than just having Clarice say, like kind of in passing, almost like, no, transsexuals are hardly ever violent. They're very passive.
Yep.
And
that's something that in the film, that in the book they go into much more. I think in the film that basically got cut mostly for brevity and editing.
Yeah,
sake, because
I
it was
figured.
already,
That being said, like I absolutely recommend that folks go watch Lindsay Ellis's video on like the history of transphobia in media.
it'll be in the
Yes,
notes.
Yes. But that and I absolutely can see like how the general American public who in 1991 was more or less unaware of anything to do with gay or trans people, like just in general, unless you knew somebody, and even then, like you didn't really know what was going on in their life, other than sometimes they got picked on for who they wanted to hold hands with and or fuck. And but that being, I understand how like the whole, you know, like you might have not had the thought, trans woman equal evil serial killer man in dress, therefore cannot be trusted. But I don't know, even when I watched this when I was very, very young, like I had a vague understand, like no one ever questioned the way I was. And so like I never got any kind of guff for not being very hetero and very cis, or not being hetero, not being cis, because everyone just assumed I was artsy. So I never got told anything was wrong. I just kind of like lived my life. But when I watched this, like I don't even get, even before I knew anyone queer besides myself, and I still had like a very kind of vague understanding of what that was at the time. I didn't get the sense that James was gay or someone who thought themselves to be a woman, or even wished that they could become a woman so that they could be anything other than themselves. I saw them as, I saw James as someone who, you know, was angry and dissatisfied with things, and so, you know, lashing out in a very socially unacceptable way. Killing people isn't great, no matter who you are.
Almost strikes me as being a person who is asexual more than anything else. That it's more about him trying to find a way to deal with this kind of psychotic belief of who and what he is. And it's actually very similar to, in a way, kind of very similar to the lead bad guy in Red Dragon, who is basically using these kind of like heightened, almost like symbolic magic acts as a way to kind of create an identity for himself that he can feel far more comfortable in. And I think that's kind of that one of the things that people talk about when you deal with serial killers is the ritualization of what it is that they do. That it becomes a formalization of a fantasy, and more often than not a power one.
I was going to say it's also a way of creating the perfect situation where you have control over what's happening.
Yeah, one of the more getting back to Mindhunters, there's a really terrifying scene where I'm hoping that they do a season 3, because I want to see more of this. They go into a history of the BTK killer, and at one point in time, he's reenacting one of his killings by literally being the victim. It's one of the most disturbing scenes I've ever seen shot. It's remarkably well done.
Well, I just wanted to kind of offer a possible explanation from a storyteller's point of view of where they where this I guess demonization of transgender folks came from back at that point. Lovecraft was a big believer of the greatest fear is the fear of the unknown. And like Kat said, you know, at that time, you know, a vast majority of the American population knew very little about what transgender was, knew very little about what homosexuality was. And it was a big unknown. and it was feared because of that. And it's the reason that they were able to, okay, 2 points here. It was the reason that they were able to cause fear of homosexuals with the AIDS situation, because they were able to pin that squarely on homosexuals as the reason that AIDS was out of control for that period of time.
Well,
and people,
that, and
well, what I'm saying is,
I'm going to add a thing, but go ahead.
People believed it because they don't know about. They didn't really bother to learn about it because it was something that was unknown and out of the norm.
Avoid.
Right. It was something that they didn't want to know about because it was not in their wheelhouse.
Yeah.
But as a storyteller back then, they may have decided, all of these situations with transgender folks being pinned as serial killers or criminals. They were able,
trans women specifically.
Right. Well, that's true. They were able to propagate that fear because of the fact that it was such an unknown, situation. People knew that it was there, but they didn't understand it. They didn't know anything about it. They didn't care to know anything about it, so they didn't bother to find out what it is all really about. And so,
but then
it was
at the
easy
same time,
for,
have like a weirdly morbid fascination with it, and be totally willing to watch serial killer movies where the villain in the film is a trans woman or someone who has kind of the trappings of,
Sure.
or is at the very least a male crossdresser.
Aesthetically, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so they were able to monetize that fear of the unknown and put it into a movie such as Silence of the Lambs, or what's that other one? It's a really kind of famous.
Texas Chainsaw Massacre is based on the same case.
No, there was another one with that was really popular film where there was a transgender female who was the killer.
Oh, Dressed to Kill.
Dressed to Kill. Thank you.
I was going to say you're talking
the
about
controversy.
The one with, Michael Caine.
Yeah, the controversy now about those kinds of films.
He wasn't a real transsexual either. He had a multiple personality thing going on.
Oh, okay.
So I was going to say, that's another psychologist with a psychopathy problem, but it's also what we would now call DID, sort of thing, which is also not well known about, and so is often very misrepresented in film.
I think, and in my brain this ties together. I don't know if I'm going to say it the right way because of the 19 crimes that I've been drinking, but so I think what's great about this movie on a certain level is that it shows that the people who don't view groups or people or individuals in like as objects or in shorthand, take things on a case-by-case basis, can notice what needs to be noticed, rather than when you're stereotyping situations, you don't see what you need to see in any given moment, because you are applying, well, this doesn't happen here, this doesn't happen there, or
which is what it makes it a great film for folks who actually like to think about what they're watching and how that might reflect back on them and how they live their lives, as opposed to just consuming it as a piece of entertainment, which there's nothing wrong with.
It works
Life
both
sucks
ways
sometimes, and sometimes you just need a little bit of popcorn to make it through the fucking day. Unfortunately, the damage that I don't want to say came directly from it, but was kind of compounded with a lot of other media representations of a lot of different kinds of people. That's the part that sucks, because not everyone is willing to
I think that's why Jonathan
Demme
is
not even willing. They just don't. They don't even think to consume it in that way.
And I think that Kat, you were right about the fact that almost advanced the fear of or created like a transphobia, because we're watching all these films like Dressed to Kill and Silence of the Lambs, where trans people are especially trans women, depicted as serial killers, that's giving the whole group a bad vibe for the rest of society. And
even if not a serial killer, then at the very least, someone to not be trusted, because if they are lying about their gender, then who knows what else they're lying about.
yeah, see,
and Lindsay does a really good job of going over that.
And it's interesting how you put that, because that's what it is that society views it as a lie when they're lying to themselves, and they just can't handle the fact that somebody is finally living their truth.
Well,
Dave, you had something.
That's also that's also the root element of the meme that happened, and actually thinking of videos that we should probably mention in here. That's the beginning of the meme. It's a trap. And how trans people became known as traps. The opening of Natalie Wynn ContraPoint's video on the subject of "Are Traps Gay?"
I'm pretty sure that is the title of the video. "Are Traps Gay?"
Yeah, but one of the opening parts of it is Milo Yiannopoulos riffing on it.
I hate this. I hate hearing his name. I hate it. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
The same way that hate hearing Ben Shapiro's name.
Yes.
Yeah. Like you just hear certain names and your hand does.
What are you doing back there? They're not even in the room.
They might walk in, and then when I do, I get to watch the taste buds fly right out of their fucking mouth.
What? No.
We would like to say that those of us at the Blokes do not
condone violence
do not condone physical violence,
Dave,
even against
or cannibalism.
True and horrific assholes.
Yeah.
To me, it's something that you sit there and coming from a perspective of somebody who really started off pretty ignorant on LGBT issues, and really, to be honest, still pretty ignorant on the subject, but learning from the people around me and having an opportunity to have my world expanded by meeting various people. I think that one of the things that I am more willing to be forgiving of a film like Psycho or a film like Silence of the Lambs based on the era. I'm also willing to be a bit more forgiving because a lot of the artists involved have said, that was not the impression we were trying to make and all that. But when you're somebody like Milo, when you're somebody who's basically sitting around spreading information that you know is wrong, specifically just so that way you can get a rise out of people, that's the moment when I sit there and think you are a waste of fucking space on our goddamn planet.
Isn't that what's the worst thing about Milo is that you know that he doesn't believe anything he's saying. He just is doing it because it's going to get more.
And I think that's the primary thing is that it's like sitting around watching somebody tell a story just for the sheer, like, I'm getting attention for doing it. And not because there's any inherent truth to it. And in the process, you're damaging people who really don't need any more shit thrown at them.
Yep.
But the money, Dave, the money, is that not a good enough reason?
For me, it's not. I mean, if I
exactly.
I know entirely too many people whose lives have been affected by bad information for me to sit there and go, so Dave, we can give you enough money to buy that house and Porsche you wanted, but you have to sit there and basically bag on the people around you. No, because y'all are far more valuable to me than that shit is. Yep. I would have to wander around the house and drive in the car thinking I basically bought that based off of the suffering of my friends. No.
Thanks, bro. That being said, I'm sure you're a highly tortured soul, and who knows, maybe you have just as much systemic abuse happening as Buffalo Bill. Does not excuse the damage that you're doing, my friend. I hope you get some help. I don't know. Technically speaking, I think psychopathy, at least. I mean, we still don't. We honestly still don't know a whole lot. We know a whole lot about like what characterizes the behaviors, but as far as like what causes them, it's still kind of like, as far as we can tell, some kind of mix of neurodevelopmental something or other, as far as like what is active in the brain and what is not. As well as sort of a social conditioning or a reaction to trauma in early life. And the truth is we don't know exactly about where it comes from so much as how to characterize it and spot it as soon as it's in action later on in life.
But here's, to me, the primary difference is that when I'm sitting down and I'm looking at somebody like Jane Gum, who is literally a psychopath.
Got like 5 names. And
Yeah, Jane Gum is literally a psychopath. So he's basically living in kind of a parallel reality to everyone else. And then that forms the basis of the horrifying shit that he does.
If you're experiencing any sort of issues in your life that are giving you or leading you to violent thoughts or tendencies to others or yourselves, to seek help and not be silent about it, but to protect yourself as well as the people in your lives by seeking help. And there's no shame in getting help. That's the main thing that we want to put across
as someone
the Lost
has
Blokes.
been in therapy a really long time.
Yes.
It can be difficult and it's uncomfortable, but it's a good thing to do. And granted, I'm someone who's far more self-destructive than I am outwardly destructive. But neither of them is great.
It's still one of the best horror movies I've ever seen. I've watched it so many times with my mom. It's a regular watch with my mom. We love it.
Let's
play.
I was going to say, let's do the round table.
As horror, psychological thriller, or both?
Both.
Same.
It almost is
not
not
a horror film.
It's almost not a horror film, but it becomes a horror film because it embraces so many of the really gruesome aspects of everything.
And not just like with visual gore. I mean,
just the ideas it's wallowing in some of them.
I mean, you could follow just the story of how Hannibal came to be under Dr. Chilton, and how Chilton views and treats his patients, as he calls them.
Would be a villain in a good show, I think.
Oh my God. Just the story between those two
really
is a fucking horror story. Even if there is no blood drawn, but that is a fucking horror story.
I did want to point out that the X-Files came out a year after Silence of the Lambs, and it has the 2 FBI agents, one that looks very much like Clarice, and has and the little location markers in the corner of the screen are in the same font. So I just feel like
interesting.
Somebody had seen Silence of the Lambs and thought, I want to do a series with that.
But make it more sci-fi than horror.
Very entertaining, rich as a story, because it doesn't just focus on the killings. You actually see the FBI workings, and ancillary characters get time, things like that. There's a whole 20-minute segment where Jodie Foster is gone, and we forget about her, and then she comes back. The only other movie I can think of that does that is Terminator 2, where the T2 is or the T1000 is the liquid metal Terminator is gone for a time period. And just the whole thing. There's nothing about it that loses my attention. It's suspenseful. All the characters are so well done. It could have easily been a bad movie if you had not made it with this level of artistry.
Right.
And I just love all the little cameos, seeing Roger Corman in there and Chris Isaac, and people who shouldn't be in movies. not because they're bad, but because they just don't act usually.
Yeah. Okay, to start with, this film is definitely a press play. I think it's that very, very rare film that almost works on every level. The pacing is perfect. The acting is totally on point. The direction and the cinematography are absolutely amazing. But let's also be aware of the idea that it is the classic example of a piece of art that has moments that are problematic. And that's something that we kind of have to keep in mind. It is a period piece in terms of our understanding of how it is that we view gender nonconforming people within the society. And
I think is a better description. Calling James GNC as in gender nonconforming, as opposed to what we would think of in 2021.
You're kind of aware that is something that we are now addressing, And you should probably watch the film with that in mind, because the book does a good job of explaining the difference between a person who is genuinely transgender versus a person who has kind of a psychotic personality
Right.
disorder. With that in mind, I still view this as being one of those very, very rare, almost perfect films. It is, some people will say psychological thriller, but my inner kind of genre fan says it is a flat out horror film. And I mean, like Hannibal Lecter, we were talking about this at the outset before anybody arrived. Hannibal Lecter as a character is basically Satan. He fills that void where he wants a little piece of you, so that way he can give you something, and he keeps drawing you in. So with that in mind, press play, enjoy the film, and keep an open mind, and then do some research.
Yes.
Very well put.
There was an immediate outcry back then. It probably wasn't as widely covered as it is now, because it's more in kind of the consciousness of the general public, rather than just folks in the queer and or trans communities. That's the end of the thought.
All right, so I guess my final thoughts are that this movie terrified me back then, and still holds a lot of horror for me now, for just so many reasons. Just the fact that, you know, serial killers do exist. You know, monsters may not, but you know, well, that's questionable. But
that line from Aliens.
My mommy always said there were no monsters, no real ones, but there are. Yes, there are, aren't there?
Yeah.
Yes, there
are.
Aren't
so you know, but as far as you know, seeing Godzilla tromping around, there is no Godzilla, but there are certainly Ed Geins and guys like that out there,
Kemper, etc. Yeah.
I'm gonna and I hate to keep interrupting, but I want to push back on that a little bit, because Godzilla was symbolic of the Hiroshima bombings.
Sure.
So that is a real monster that reflects in the real world as a
right.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, you don't see the giant terror lizard. That's what I'm getting at. You don't see.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm saying is that the movie still scares me when I watch it. You know, it still makes me feel uneasy during the film. But I love it all just the same, because the acting is so incredible and so well thought out directing and so well thought out placement of plot line and story and everything else. As everybody's mentioned, the problematic parts, but back then it wasn't viewed that way. Back then it was used as a trope. And now we realize, you know, and right after that movie came out,
trope.
Why is this? You know, this is a problem. We're demonizing an entire culture, and you know, we need to stop that, because it's going to create violence towards them. Or at the very least, non-inclusion. So, you know, and that is all stuff that we are addressing nowadays, and that's perfect. And you know, films like that, as horrific as they are, just remind us, you know, that you know, that's a trope, but it's a good movie, and it's a horrific movie, and really sets the mind and imagination going. But absolutely a press play for me.
Oh my God. You've got in his murder room, where they've got like the medical examination table, where I assume is where he performs the skinning portion of stuff. There's also a fish tank that's like burbling, and I'm pretty sure that there are like the skin wraps of like, I don't know if he actually tans the skin before he sews it, but there is definitely like something floating around in that tank, and I'm pretty sure it's like, this is an arm, this is a leg, except with all of the inside stripped out, and it's just the skin.
When I saw him sewing the skin, I thought of John and his leathering, and I thought there might be something to ask him about that. Is there
in the books, they do actually go into, yes, he definitely tans the skin beforehand, because it's a preservative to keep it together.
Yeah, otherwise you end up with it molding.
John, would that skin be hard to work with?
No, not at all.
Jeez.
Not at all. Once tanned, it would just be like butter.
I'll be over here being terrified. Thanks.
I'm terrified.
Okay, here are my last two things.
Okay.
Clarice getting her special agent badge, having that last little moment with Crawford, where he's like, I gotta get out of here. I'm not good at these things. Which at least, hey, he's honest with himself. That's a good thing. Maybe there's hope for him. No, he did an okay job for being a man, a white man with a high position in the FBI in 1991.
He's well intentioned and doing his best.
Yeah.
And that's all
He's
we can
learning
do,
from
right?
his mi- and he learns from his
do your
mistakes.
best until you know better, and then you do better. Clarice, like, I love how she totally isn't even trying to cover up that powder burn on her cheek, with makeup or anything, or if she is, like, it's very subtle. Like, she's wearing it. She's here to do the thing. But then also, I definitely had this thought where I see Chilton getting out of the plane. I'm like, oh, good. That's right. I forgot this was a thing. I remember the phone call at the end between Hannibal and Clarice, but that's the important thing for me. But then seeing Dr. Chilton get off the plane, and I'm like, Chilton's going to get what's coming to him. So yes, press play. Absolutely.
right.
If you are someone who does not have any kind of gender nonconforming people, any kind of queer people, any kind of trans people in your life, like, watch this. Take those images with a grain of salt. And then after that, you can go watch some of the movies that hopefully we will link down below, including Lindsay Ellis's video on the history of transphobia in media, specifically film. But then also there are a couple of things that I wanted to throw in from one person in particular, is Verily Bitchy. They do some great stuff on non-binary folks and the history of bisexuality as it exists in the public consciousness, and recently has done a lot of great things pertaining to vampires in film and their curiosity. But in particular, that takes me back to the thing that John was saying, like, everybody being so ready and willing to blame the AIDS epidemic on homosexual men. There was also a huge push against bisexual women from the lesbian community, and a whole push from the straight community against bisexual men, because they were basically taking the gay disease and bringing it back to whatever, the good group was. So not to say that bisexuals have suffered the same kind of damage and violence, at least in the public eye, as gay folks and trans folks. It's just a different kind of thing. But that, again, it's all more stuff that you can learn, and there are so many great things about this movie as far as that goes. And y'all know me, if there are like umpteen million reads that you could do on a film, and you can watch it again and again and again through a different lens and get more stuff out of it, and lead you to other bits of media and new bits of IRL knowledge, then, like, it's, as they said, it's just about perfect. And despite, yes, it's kind of, it would be disingenuous to say that it didn't have an impact on how the general public views at least the vague concept of trans women. It's still one of the best movies ever made.
you.